Okay, so starting off today's show with the ACC preview, I'm going to have to go with the number one team that I think is going to win the ACC for this upcoming basketball season, and that's going to be Tony Bennett and his Virginia Cavaliers. And Virginia and Tony Bennett, they're now going to be in the 12th year since he got to Charlottesville, and it's crazy because the last time we've seen a team win a national championship, it was Virginia with Ty Jerome and Kyle Guy, and it's crazy because Virginia last season, they had a very up and down season. If you remember in the preseason last year, many people, including myself, actually had Virginia as a top 5 to 10 team and a team that would be right in contention to win the ACC. And the crazy thing is that Virginia actually was, by season's end, in good position to win the ACC. Just the road to get there was very odd. Virginia started it off their season not so good, losing some games in non-conference play and then even some games in conference that, to be honest, no one would ever really expect a Tony Bennett coached Virginia team to lose. But then towards the back end of the season, when the ACC schedule got tougher and tougher, Virginia was able to bear down and get the job done. So looking at Virginia's schedule last year, they started off okay. They lose to Purdue. They then lose at home to South Carolina. These are the games I mean. Also losing on the road to Boston College and losing at home to Syracuse. These are the games Virginia usually does not lose. They also lost to NC State at home on January 20th, and at the time, that pushed their record to 12-6 overall and 4-4 in the ACC. And then all of a sudden, Virginia ends their season. Overtime win at Wake Forest. Home win against Florida State, who was a top 5 team. Home win against Clemson. Lost to Louisville on the road when they were ranked 5th. Notre Dame win at home. At UNC win on the road. Boston College win at home. At Pitt win. Virginia Tech home win. Duke win. And that's the big game I remember when they were able to beat Duke. Miami win. Louisville win. And then all of a sudden the ACC tournament gets canceled. So people may forget it, but Virginia actually last year was one of the hottest teams in college basketball when the season got canceled. And it's crazy because this team, even though I think they're going to be pretty good, and I'm going to predict them to win the ACC, they still do lose a lot. And most importantly, two of their most important wing players, Braxton Key and Mamadi Diakite, and both of these guys did so much for this Virginia team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And last year, Virginia had the 234th ranked offense in college basketball and almost won the ACC. So then you ask yourself, okay, how did these guys almost win the ACC? And the answer is with elite defense. And with Diakite and Braxton Key gone, my first question for this Virginia team, along with Tony Bennett, is how are they going to be able to adjust to losing those two guys? I think bringing in Sam Hauser, the transfer from Marquette, will really help Virginia on the offensive side of the ball. But at the same time, what does that do to Virginia's defense? I understand Sam Hauser is pretty tall. He's like 6'8", 6'9", pretty good rebounder as well. But at the same time, I don't know what he's going to do to Virginia's defense. And I think a big key for this Virginia team for me is the 4-5 combo of Sam Hauser and Jay Huff. Both guys could shoot it, which could help. And I think in today's modern day basketball world, playing those two guys at the 4 and 5 that could both shoot, that will really help this Virginia team. And it's going to be interesting for me to see how exactly Sam Hauser adjusts to this role at Virginia when you consider the fact that he played at Marquette. And if you watch Marquette, you know just how fast-paced that offense is and how they're really willing to create offense at any time. And now Sam Hauser is going to have to learn the pack line defense, but at the same time, he has actually been practicing in this Virginia system for the last year. So I think ultimately that does help them out, and that does make me a little bit more comfortable in picking them to win the ACC because Sam Hauser, even though he didn't play last year, was able to get his reps in practice, learn the system, and stuff like that. So I mentioned the 4-5 for Virginia. Jay Huff is a guy that played spare minutes on that national championship team 2 years ago, really adjusted to a better and bigger role last year, averaging 8.5 points per game and 6 rebounds per game. And I do like the 4-5 combination of Hauser and Huff. Both of those guys could really shoot. And then also playing for Virginia is going to be Tomas Wolden-Tenzai, the 6'5 senior. And he only averaged 6.6 points per game last year. But down the stretch, you could talk to any Virginia fan. He was one of their more consistent scorers, one of the more consistent shooters. And the cool thing about this Virginia team is that they're going to be playing a 3-4-5 that could all shoot the basketball. And I remember last year saying this about Michigan, that when they played that big 3-4-5 lineup of Wagner, Livers, and John Teskey, that was a real threat to some other teams because no one else could really guard those kind of guys with respectful size on the perimeter, and Michigan ultimately was able to take advantage of it. I know Virginia is really built around their defense, but I'm curious to see if this year, right, with the addition of Sam Hauser, he's not a great defender, neither is Wilden Tenzai. I'm curious to see if Virginia takes a little bit of a step back on defense, but maybe their offense does improve a little bit. I still think Tony Bennett will have this team playing some of the best defense in the country. I'm just going to make a prediction. I think Virginia's defense is going to take a slight step back, and I think their offense is going to take a slight step forward. The two guys in the backcourt, Kihei Clark, he is the point guard for this Virginia team, and it's crazy because I remember at this time last year when we were breaking down Virginia, Kihei Clark and the point guard position was one of the biggest concerns really everyone would have for this Virginia team. Last year, Clark averaged 10.8 points per game, 4 rebounds a game, and about 6 assists per game, and about a steal per game. And I remember 2 years ago when Virginia won their NCAA tournament championship, Kihei Clark was one of the more important players in that run because he had that crazy no-look pass to Diakite against Purdue at the buzzer, and that ultimately would send the game into overtime, and then we know what happened next. Virginia ended up winning the game, and Kihei Clark was a part of that team, so he does have some big game experience, and I really liked last year the composure he was able to lead this Virginia team with. And I feel like whenever the ball was in his hands and I was watching Virginia, even though their offense sometimes could never score, I was always like, all right, the ball is in Kihei Clark's hands. I believe he's going to get the job done. And that was especially the case when Virginia was going on their hot streak towards the back end of ACC play. The other kid I want to talk about for Virginia is Casey Morsell. He's a sophomore, and if you remember, also at this time last year, he was one of the main reasons why a lot of people loved this Virginia team. There were some people that were really hopping on their bandwagon because of Casey Morsell, and of course, he averages 4 points per game, 1.7 rebounds per game, and not even a full assist per game. And I do think this year he's going to be much better because last year shouldn't have really have shocked us that Casey Morsell had a not so great year. I understand he was a very highly ranked recruit, and I totally understand that he did have a little bit more of a role that was open to him, but it happens. Unfortunately, he just wasn't ready for it. And when you look at some of the other really successful Virginia Cavalier basketball players over the last couple of years since Tony Bennett has been there, I think one common theme that we have all noticed is that those guys usually do struggle as freshmen. Kyle Guy really did not play much as a freshman. Neither did Ty Jerome. And those guys are in the NBA right now. So I do think Casey Morsell this season, now that he's a little bit more familiar with everything, now that he has experience playing with a Clark and a Wilden Tenzai and a Huff, maybe that will be able to help this Virginia team. Now, one of my only other concerns for this Virginia team is their bench. I think they're going to need Jabri Abdur-Rahim and Reese Beekman, the two freshmen, in this class to really step up and lead the bench. I think it's helpful to them that they're not going to be starting, and I think they're going to be given a real opportunity to get some buckets for this Virginia team because I totally understand that I just said historically freshmen really have not played well for Virginia, but Abdur-Rahim is 6'7". I've heard some good things about him. Beekman, most people say, is a little bit more skilled than Rahim. He stands at 6'3". He could shoot it a little bit. So I do think both of those guys are really going to have an opportunity to play some minutes here. And the question is now, are they going to be able to take advantage of it and kind of end this trend of, okay, freshmen historically just don't play well for Tony Bennett at Virginia? That's going to be one of the main things I monitor for this Virginia team. And then the other guy I wanted to talk about a little bit is Justin McCoy. He's going to be like their stretch four coming off the bench. He's 6'8". And the thing I'm curious with about him is that he's a little bit more similar to the kind of player that when Virginia was having elite defense and winning, their national championship, they were playing that kind of 6'8", lengthy Justin McCoy type at the power forward position. I'm curious to see if Sam Hauser's offense isn't as good as everyone expects it to be and his defense just isn't good, if Tony Bennett's like, all right, Justin, here's your opportunity, because we know historically that's how Virginia has won. They have won with their defense and not with their offense. And once again, I do think this team does have the potential to be better offensively. I'm just curious to see what price Tony Bennett is willing to pay to maybe make his defense a little worse in order to make his offense a little better. But that's the thing about the preseason stuff in college basketball. I remember when you look at a team on paper, you could think they're going to look totally one way on the floor, and then once the basketball games get here, they look totally different than anyone could have ever expected. And watching the Kentucky Pro Day last night was crazy because it just felt so weird seeing people shoot basketballs again and seeing players, in the gym with music going. It was a really nice thing. So it's going to be interesting to see how exactly this Virginia team fits together. But for me, I believe in Tony Bennett, believe in their returning talent, and I believe they are winning the ACC.